Hey, what's going on everyone? Welcome to the Dual Sanctuary. My name is Rifiso and today we're doing a Firewall Dragon Code Talker deck profile. This is definitely one of the most difficult decks I've ever played that utilizes everything the link summoning mechanic has to offer. You have to pay attention to everything. Where your link arrows are pointed to, in which zones do you summon your monsters, are they linked, are they co-linked? Every small detail matters. So it can be a bit difficult to get into at first, but once you get the hang of it, it feels all the more rewarding playing it. These archetypes were used by the main character of the Yu-Gi-Oh! Vrains anime, Yusaku Fujiki, and his ace monster was the original Firewall Dragon. And this card was at one point so incredibly powerful, it was banned in the TCG in December of 2018 and in the OCG in January 2019. And after this card was banned in the OCG, it was never to be seen again in the anime. Imagine Yugi suddenly never summoning Dark Magician anymore halfway through the Battle City tournament. Luckily, they gave this card an errata a couple of years later. And unlike a lot of other cards that were also unbanned with an errata, this card is still very capable. So first we're doing the deck profile, and in the second part of the video I'll show you a basic combo the deck can do to show you what it's capable of. And now, without any further ado,
it's time to link into the brains.
So before starting off with the monsters, I first want to quickly go over the most important card of the deck, Signet Codec. Because this card is so integral to the strategy and influences a lot of the card choices we make on our main deck and extra deck. This is a continuous spell that every time you special summon a Code Talker monster from your extra deck, you can target that monster and then search your deck for a Cybers monster with the same attribute as the monster you just summoned. You can only search every attribute once per turn, and you can only use Signet Codec once per chain. So as you're going to see in the combo guide later in the video, this card allows us to search directly and indirectly for so many cards, it's absolutely crazy. And thanks to this card we can swarm the field with Cybers monsters and climb into multiple big link monsters. So we want to fill our deck and extra deck with a lot of different attributes, because the more attributes the more searches we get. And we also want to have access to this card as consistently as humanly possible, so keep that in mind while going through the rest of the deck profile. Okay, so the first monster in the main deck we're playing is triple copies of Firewall Defensor. You can banish it from the graveyard to prevent one of your Firewall monsters from being destroyed by card effect. But its most important effect is that if it's sent to the graveyard for a link summon, it can special summon a Firewall monster from your deck. And the monsters we'll be summoning off of this effect is Firewall Phantom or Firewall Guardian. You can banish Firewall Phantom from the graveyard and then in the end phase recycle one of your link monsters in the graveyard back to the extra deck. But more importantly, if it's sent to the graveyard for a link summon, you can add a Signet spell or trap from your deck to your hand. Then you have to discard a card. So this card searches for the most important card of the deck, Signet Codec, so that's really good. If we already have Signet Codec in our hand, we can summon Firewall Guardian instead. Firewall Guardian can special summon back to the field if it's used for a link summon, but then banishes when it leaves the field. So a nice extender option if you already have access to the codec. The next card we're playing is Microcoder. This is one of the most important cards of the deck. If we summon a Code Talker monster from our extra deck, we can use Microcoder from our hand as a link material. And if it's sent from the hand to the graveyard to link summon a Code Talker, we can search our deck for a Signet spell or trap. But if it was on the field, we can choose to either add a Signet spell or trap or a level 4 or lower Cybers monster. So this is why our Microcoder is so important, because it also searches for Signet Codec, and we can use it for a link summon from the hand, so we don't even need to summon it. And we have a couple of cards in our deck that are very similar to Microcoder with different attributes that we can use in our hand to link summon a Code Talker monster that does something when they are sent to the graveyard from the hand, but if it's sent from the field you can optionally choose for another effect. And those monsters are Code Generator, Code Exporter, and Code Radiator. So all of these monsters can be used from the hand to link summon a Code Talker monster, and if they are sent from the hand to the graveyard to link summon, Code Generator can send a Cybers with 1200 attack or less from the deck to the graveyard, or if it was on the field you can add it instead. Exporter can add a level 4 or lower Cybers monster from your grave back to the hand, or if it was on the field, special summon it instead but negate its effects. Code Radiator can target and negate one of our opponent's monsters and change its attack to 0, but if it was on the field you can target 2 monsters, so that's pretty good if we're going second. So that's it for the code monsters that can link from the hand. We're also playing triple copies of Lady Debug. This monster can on summon search the deck for a level 3 or lower Cybers monster. Another nice card to improve our consistency and give us another way to get to our Signet codec because it can search for Microcoder. Next up, one copy of Nightmare Corruptor Ibli. This card prevents you from special summoning except for link monsters, so that's a pretty big restriction. But if Ibli is sent to the graveyard, you can special summon it to our opponent's field in defense position. So we summon this, link it off and give it to our opponent, and now our opponent cannot special summon anything except for link monsters. This monster can in certain matchups be an auto win if they don't have any link monsters in the extra deck. Ibli locking is not our main goal or strategy of the deck, but we do have it available. And we can do another cool trick with this card, which I'll show you later in the combo part of the video. Next we're playing a lot of extenders, like 2 copies of Parallel Exceed. This card can special summon from the hand if you link summon a monster to a zone that monster points to. And then you can special summon another Parallel Exceed from the deck and they both change to level 4 and their attack and defense is halved. So a really nice option to continue link climbing. Next, more extenders, 1 Dot Caver. This card can once per duel special summon if it's sent to the graveyard. Code of Soul can special summon if you control a link monster and you can banish it from the graveyard during your opponent's main phase to then link summon using monsters you control. And Gacheria at Ignister can special summon to the field by targeting and then negating one of your own Cybers monsters. And if it's used for a link summon, you can target one monster you control. That monster becomes unaffected by your opponent's monster effects until the end of your opponent's turn. And then the last ones. Backup Secretary can special summon to the field if you control another Cybers monster. Link Infraflyer can special summon to a zone your link monster points to. And Cybers Converter can special summon if you control only Cybers monsters, and we only have Cybers monsters, except for our hand traps of course, so that's never going to be a problem. So that's it for the monsters. Now let's take a look at the spells and traps. First we're playing triple copies of Signet Codec. Of course I already explained this card at the beginning of the deck profile. This card is absolutely busted. We're also playing 3 copies of Signet Mining. Discard a card to search for a level 4 or lower Cybers monster. Another card to improve our consistency and search cards that search Signet Codec. And then the last cards we're playing 1 copy of Salamangrate Sanctuary and Signet Conflict. Salamangrate Sanctuary is a free search in the deck which you'll see in the combo. And Signet Conflict is a great Signet card to search if we already have Signet Codec. You can only activate it if you have a Code Talker. This counter trap can negate the activation of a spell, trap or monster effect and then banish that card. And if you do, your opponent cannot activate another copy of that card until the end of the next turn. So that's really good. Normally when you negate the activation of a card, Triple Tactics Talent for example with Solemn Judgment, and your opponent has a second copy in their hand, they can just activate it again. But with this card they cannot. So it's an archetype specific Solemn Judgment but better in most ways. So that's it for the archetype specific cards. Up until now we're playing 31 cards. The 2 biggest weaknesses of the Code Talker strategy is that you do not have a lot of room for non-engine, like hand traps and other good generic staples. And the second weakness is its over-reliance on having Signet Codec. Going second without Codec is still okay. If you're going first with a decent opening hand, you can play through some hand traps, but if those hand traps prevent you from getting to your codec, you're probably going to lose the duel. So that's why we're playing triple Crossout Designator and 1 Call by the Grave. These cards help us stop our opponent's hand traps. And then we play a couple of hand traps so we can use our Crossout Designator. 2 Nibiru, Ash Blossom and Effect Veiler, and Infinite Impermanence. And you can change any of these around of course, depending on what you're expecting to see. If you're expecting Draw on Logbird, take one of these out and add it in, or just play 1 extra card. With this specific deck build you have a 90% chance of having Signet Codec or a card that can search it in your opening hand. Adding 1 more card decreases that to around 89%, so that's not that big a deal. And the last card we're playing is 2 copies of Triple Tactics Talent. I love the versatility of this card. If we get stopped in our tracks by a hand trap, we can draw 2 cards to get more extenders and hopefully continue playing. If we get hand trapped but we can still keep going, we can look at our opponent's hand to see if they have any more disruptions and shuffle one of those back in the deck. Or if we go second, this card help breaks our opponent's board by taking control of one of their monsters. So that's it for the main deck. Now let's check out the extra deck. Firewall Dragon can special summon a Cyberse monster from your hand when a monster it points to is sent to the graveyard. And once while face up on the field, it can bounce monsters on the field and or graveyard back to the hand, up to the amount of monsters it's co-linked to. So we aim to have like at least 2 or 3 co-linked cards to bounce 3 cards, so that's really good. Then Firewall Dragon Singularity. This is the second Link 6 monster ever created. The first one was the Arrival at Ignister. Its effects are very similar to Firewall Dragon. When a monster it points to is sent to the graveyard, you can special summon a Cyberse monster from the graveyard. And instead of monster, Singularity can bounce any card from the field and or graveyard back to the hand, not just monsters. Up to the amount of different card types we have on the field and in the graveyard. So that's Fusion, Ritual, Synchro and Xyz. So how do we get those monsters in the graveyard? Well, that's where our Neo Tempest Terahertz comes in. This card can, quick effect, send one Cyberse monster from our deck or extra deck to the graveyard and then it gains 2500 attack, and also the attribute of the monster you send. It can attack up to the number of its attributes, and it negates any activated monster effects from our opponent during the battle phase. So you can make this turn 1, send a Fusion to the graveyard, its attack goes up to 5500. Then during your opponent's turn you can send an Xyz to the graveyard, its attack goes up to 8000. Then we have a Fusion and an Xyz in the graveyard, so Singularity's effect is live to bounce 2 cards. So these two work really well together. The cards Terahertz will send to the graveyard are Cyberse the Save Worm and Meteorologic Aggregator. If you control a Link 4 monster, you can banish the Save Worm from the graveyard to negate the activation of a spell or trap card. And if Aggregator is sent to the graveyard, you can target one face-up card on the field to negate its effect until the end of the turn. So the cards we'll send with Terahertz turn into extra disruption. Okay, so next up a lot of Link monsters that help us get into these powerful boss monsters. 1 Salamangreat Balings and 1 Link Decoder. These help us link off certain monsters to trigger their graveyard effects. And Link Decoder can special summon back to the field if you use it for a Link monster with 2300 or more attack, but then it vanishes when it leaves the field. Next up a couple of Link 2s, Code Talker Inverted, and Splash Mage. Code Talker cannot be destroyed by battle or card effects while it points to a monster. Its effects are usually irrelevant. We use this card mostly so we can use our microcoder in our hand to link summon and search Signet Codec. If Code Talker Inverted is link summoned, you can special summon a Cyberse monster from your hand. That's really good. And it's a light, so if you have a codec on your field, you can search your deck for a light Cyberse monster. So we can search Lady Debug, for example. And Splash Mage is just a really good generic Cyberse monster. It can reborn any Cyberse monster back on the field in defense but negates its effects. So this card makes it really easy to go into our Link 3s. Which are Transcode Talker, Xcode Talker and Protect Code Talker. Transcode Talker can reborn a Link 3 or lower Cyberse monster from the graveyard. And while it's co-linked, both monsters cannot be targeted by card effects. And its attribute is Earth, so we can search for an Earth Cyberse monster with our Signet Codec. Xcode Talker protects the monster it points to from being destroyed by card effects. It also has another effect that's not really relevant, except we can use it for chain blocking, which I'll show you in the combo part of the video. The most important thing is Wind attribute, which means we can use it to search for our Parallel Exceed. And then Protect Code Talker. This card protects your Link 4 and higher monsters from targeting effects, and they also cannot be destroyed by battle. And you can reborn it from the graveyard by banishing monsters whose combined Link rating is exactly 3, so this card is also pretty good. And then finally the last 2 extra deck monsters, Update Jammer and Access Code Talker. These are for when we're going second. We'll usually have at least like 3 or 4 different attributes in our graveyard. So Access Code can destroy 3 or 4 cards on the field, and if you link summon Access Code with Update Jammer, it can attack twice. So Access Code Talker with Update Jammer in this deck is just one big OTK machine. So that's it for the extra deck. Before we're getting into the combo guide, I first want to quickly go over some cards we are not playing. First, we're not playing IP, Masquerena and Avermax. I was playtesting with these cards for a couple of days because I was trying to figure out what to do when going first and not having access to the codec. And I'm not going to lie to you guys, it's not good. If you don't have access to the codec, your turn 1 is going to be very underwhelming. And one of the things I thought about was making an indestructible Avermax turn 1, and I ultimately decided to take these out because it was just not good enough. And while Avermax is a very good card, I found that making Avermax while not having access to codec uses a lot of your resources. And even if I survived my opponent's turn, I noticed that I didn't have enough resources to OTK the next turn with access code, for example. So I instead focused on having access to codec as consistently as possible. And now we have room to play Update Jammer in the extra deck, cause going second while not having codec is not that big of a problem. You're basically trying to keep link climbing through your opponent's disruptions into an access code talker to OTK. Which is definitely easier with Signet codec, but doable without it. And then a couple of cards I'm also not playing is what I call the Ritual package. Cyber Switch, Signet Ritual, Cyber Sage and Integrator. So there's a combo you can do with Cyber Switch to search a ritual monster and spell, and then use Sage to fusion summon a monster and synchro into Integrator. And if you can perform this combo successfully, it feels really awesome. You're using every summoning mechanic except for Pendulum in one single turn, which is definitely very cool. And the end board is insane. As I was playtesting with these cards, I now ultimately found that these may increase the maximum power level or increase the ceiling of what your deck can do. But if you made it this far in the combo that you can do all this fun ritual stuff, you're probably already winning the game. And while these cards may increase the ceiling of your deck, they decrease your consistency. So I ultimately decided to take these out and focus on what the deck can already do more consistently. So now let's take a look at what this deck can do. Okay, the combo I'm going to show you requires 2 cards. Firewall Defensor and a generic Cybers Extender. I'll use Backup Secretary, this one doesn't have any secondary beneficial effects, it's just an extra special summon. So we'll start off by normal summoning our Firewall Defensor, and then link it off into Salamangreat Balings. Then we'll activate Defender in the graveyard as Chainlink 1, and Balings as Chainlink 2. Balings adds Salamangreat Sanctuary, and Firewall Defensor special summons Firewall Phantom from the deck. Then we'll link these 2 off into Splash Mage. And then Phantom's effect activates in the graveyard. Now we can add our Signet codec to our hand, and then discard a card. Next we use Splash Mage to reborn our Firewall Defensor. And don't forget to activate codec before we link summon these 2 into our Transcode Talker. Now that we have summoned an Earth Code Talker from the extra deck, we can now use our codec to search for an Earth Cybers monster. We'll grab the Code Generator here. Next we'll use Transcode's effect to reborn our Splash Mage from the graveyard. And then we'll link the Splash Mage and the Code Generator from the hand into Xcode Talker. And now multiple effects activate here. We'll go Chainlink 1, 2, 3. Xcode can lock up one of our opponent's zones. Like I said during the deck profile, this effect is not really relevant, but by activating it our opponent cannot use Ash Blossom on our Signet codec or Code Generator. So now the Code Generator sends our Dotscaper to the graveyard, and Signet codec grabs our Parallel Exceed. And because Dotscaper was sent to the graveyard, it reborns onto the field. The next step is to link off the Transcode Talker and the Dotscaper into our Code Talker Inverted. And now we can use 2 effects, and this is the chain link order I screw up the most. Usually we want our codec to be on their lower chain link so our opponent cannot use Ash Blossom, for example. But in this case we want our Code Talker Inverted to be chain link 1. Inverted can special summon any Cybers monster from the hand, and now codec Chainlink 2 can search for any light Cybers monster. So we'll grab Lady Debug, and then Inverted's effect resolves and we can normal summon the debug we just searched. Important to know is that you already need to have a monster in your hand that Inverted could special summon, otherwise you cannot activate its effect. But we already searched for a parallel exceed, so we already had a legal target for the effect. So now Lady Debug is summoned and this card can search our deck for Micro Coder. Then we link off the X-Code Talker and the Lady Debug and special summon Firewall Dragon. And because we link summoned, we can trigger our Exceed in the hand to special summon to where the Firewall Dragon is pointing to. And now that it is on the field, we can special summon another one from the deck. Next, we use the Microcoder in the hand and the Inverted to link summon the Protect Code Talker. And then again we have 3 effects we can activate and we have to do them in the right order. Chainlink 1 Firewall Dragon to special summon a monster from the hand. Chainlink 2 Codec to search for a Dark Cybers monster. And Chainlink 3 Microcoder to add Cynet Conflict to our hand. Then the Codec adds our Ibli. And then the Firewall Dragon's effect resolves, special summoning Ibli from our hand. Now that our field is filled with link material, you are going to make a big link summon. We'll use Firewall Dragon, this parallel exceed specifically, and the Ibli to make our Link 6 boss monster, Firewall Dragon Singularity. And now that Ibli is sent to the graveyard, we can special summon it to the opponent's field. I like to special summon it in the center zone specifically, I'll explain a little bit later why. Next we're going to link off the parallel exceed the Singularity points to and make Link Decoder. This triggers our Singularity's effect. Because a monster points to left the field, we can reborn a Cybers. So we reborn our Firewall Dragon and summon it over here. Then we are finally going to special summon the backup secretary, the one extender we had in our opening hand, and use it with our Protect code and the decoder to link summon our third Firewall Dragon, Neo Tempest Terahertz. Now we can summon the link decoder in the graveyard back to the field, but in this case I'm not going to because we don't need it anymore, but we could summon it back if we need an extra body. But what we are going to reborn from the graveyard is Protect code. By banishing our X code we can special summon it back to the field. Then we use our Terahertz to send our The Save Room from the extra deck to the graveyard. This card gives us a spell or trap negates. We'll set the Cynet Conflict we searched earlier and we'll banish the Firewall Phantom to shuffle back a Cybers monster. I like to recycle Splash Mage specifically so we can use it again next turn. So now we pass it to the opponent and one of the first things they should do is get rid of the Ibli by linking it away, for example with Lingeribo. Let's put this over here. So now that a monster that our Firewall Dragon Singularity was pointing to left the field, the Ibli, Singularity can reborn a Cybers monster from the graveyard. That's why I like to summon the Ibli to the center zone specifically, because the Singularity has all the arrows pointing forward to left, right and forward. So it can point to the center zone in both the extra monster zones. So you have to change the combo for some reason, it doesn't matter in which the extra monster zone we summon the Singularity. So then our Singularity reborns our Transcode Talker from the graveyard and this is our end board. First off we have the Protect Code Talker, which protects all our Link 4 and higher monsters from being destroyed by battle and they cannot be targeted. Then Transcode Talker protects our Protect Code Talker from being targeted and also itself. So all our monsters are now untargetable. We have Firewall Dragon, which is co-linked with 3 other monsters, which means it can target and return 3 monsters on the field and or graveyard back to the opponent's hand. We also have Cybers The Save Room waiting in the graveyard to negate a spell or trap. And Terahertz can send the Aggregator to the graveyard and this card can now, on a new chain, negate a face-up card on the field. And then Singularity can, depending on the different types of monster cards we have, return cards on the field and or graveyard back to the hand. So ideally we use the aggregator first so it can bounce an extra card. And we still have our Signet Conflict counter trap to negate any spell, trap or monster effect. So yeah, this end board is absolutely crazy. And this is the end of the combo part of the video. I still feel there's so much more to explore what this deck can do. Do you have any other ideas to improve the deck or the combo? Please let me know in the comments. And I see you later.